Hundreds of thousands of researchers around the world are working to improve life and address imminent threats to humanity. Often their research ends up in the scientific valley of death in the form of publications and patents that never see the light of day. That is about to change. Welcome to the Lab to Startup podcast, hosted by Naresh Sunkara, founder and executive director of the Berkeley Postdoc Entrepreneurship Program at the University of California, Berkeley. This show has two main goals: share the stories of those who have successfully founded startups based on their own research, and highlight resources needed to help those aspiring to launch startups in the deep tech space. Whether it's electric cars, vaccines, addressing climate change concerns, or possibly establishing life on other planets, Naresh and his esteemed guests want to help scientists, engineers, faculty, and researchers bring their innovations to market. Learn more and subscribe today at labtostartup.com. And now, here's Naresh.
My guests today are Xiaoxi Wei and Mark Kline, the co-founders of X-Therma, a biotechnology company developing a breakthrough technology for organ preservation and regenerative medicine. In this episode of Lab to Startup, we talk about the challenges around organ preservation and transplantation and how a technology they developed at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory is being used to increase the life of organs to up to a week. We will talk about the inspiration to launch the startup, their unique success around raising non-dilutive funding, creating a culture at the startup, and the importance of freedom to make decisions not driven by investors. And last but not the least, we will also talk about their personal life briefly as their unique co-founders on that front. Xiaoxi and Mark have been good friends of mine for a very long time, and I'm excited to share their story on the show. Hope you find some important lessons in here. Xiaoxi and Mark, welcome to the show. We've been trying to have this conversation about X-Therma for a while, but had to move this around a few times, and I'm so glad we are doing this today.
Thank you very much. Glad to connect here.
Super excited.
Xiaoxi, maybe you can set the stage for this conversation by talking about the organ preservation and transplantation problem that you're solving at X-Therma, which has been a problem for a very long time. Please talk about the scale of the problem and the existing solutions and the issues with those.
Absolutely, Naresh. Yeah, so my grandpa left me for decades. Now we're still facing like a severe problem for organ shortage. In the world, we spent like over $100 billion to take care of probably less than 150,000 solid organ transplant. That's about heart, lung, liver, and kidneys, several other smaller organs. But that number does not even meet 10% of actual need and demand in the whole world. Sadly, every single hour, if the person needs the organ transplant, they put on the wait list. Every single hour, there's one patient die on that wait list. You will naturally think like, oh, we don't have enough donors. That's not entirely true. Actually, in a country like the US and Germany and others, we have over 60% of the patients willing to donate our life-saving gift for others. And one donor can save 8 lives. But what is the problem? Shockingly, 80% of the transplantable organs are currently not going to be transplanted. They went on waste. If you look deeper, the major issue here is we are running out of time when we're doing the organ procurement. We get the organ from the donor, and then it's just the race against the time. So, for example, for heart, take it out, like preserve with legacy solutions. The white ice, like keep at 4 degrees C above zero, and the heart only lasts for 4 hours, including the procurement, the transportation, and get back on the patient. So you really cannot travel very far. For kidney, 16 hours. That's the longest lasting organs. So because of that, you hear those stories and a helicopter crash, like the entire transplant team got lost. So this is really against the time. The race is super difficult. So we're here like trying to really take the time out of the equation by moving into the breakthrough technology so you can actually slow down the damage. As I mentioned, fundamentally, chemistry level, everything slows down, damage slows down when the temperature goes lower. But if you can take out the side effect, which is ice formation, then you can make this happen. You can make the organ last from hours to days. So you can immediately get a lot more organs for transplant, so eliminate those 80%, 50% waste. And also you can get a higher quality of organs because now you can halt the ischemia damage through the entire process. You receive a much higher quality of organs. So patients can have a better recovery, less time stay in the ICU and less suppressants. And also the most amazing thing is you can potentially do a organ matching. Has never happened before. As you know, kidney is the only organ currently we have partially matched, but still not done in the absolute best way. So we still have about 20% patients who receive a kidney transplant still go for rejection because the kidney simply does not match. So imagine now if you can say, I can bank the organs for a couple of days of time, then you really gain this crucial time, can potentially get deep into sequencing levels, the genetic levels to match the donor and the recipients. Potentially you solve the biggest problem, actually achieve the holy grail goal, 1 organ per life. Instead of currently, if you get a kidney for transplant, it does not last forever. Probably likelihood in another 5 to 7 years, you need another transplant. So that's something drive us every day to solve these issues. Truly make a global organ sharing become possible.
Isn't human ingenuity so fascinating? The fact that we can take somebody's heart, put it into somebody else's who needs that, figuring that out is a big deal. But then it's such a bummer that the time is what is limiting in this factor there, that we can't preserve them long enough. Mark, this may be a good point to plug in some background for the research you are carrying out at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory that is solving the problems that Xiaoxi talked about.
I would say when I was working in my postdoctoral studies there at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, I worked on a class of molecules called a peptoid. And so those are very similar to a peptide. You just move the atoms around a little bit. It's the closest you can be to a peptide as a synthetic molecule. So working in general on those classes, I worked on a DARPA project to try to detect antigens for potential threats like anthrax or anthrax release in a subway system. How can we detect, how do we know it's anthrax very quickly? And these molecules that we developed during that program were able to do that. And so when we were working on that program of peptoids, we worked on new methods for synthesis. So we are able to take those methods from synthesis and incorporate those into X-Therma's work that Xiaoxi had developed there on her own with the company as it started, and use those methods to actually progress X-Therma much more rapidly, not only just in discovery, but also in scale-up technology. I think the work at the foundry there was crucial to being able to learn about peptoids and how they function, and then become an expert in them at least enough to be able to push the technology forward.
Thank you for that background, Mark. But Xiaoxi, before we go too deep into the technology aspects, I want to make sure we talk about the inspiration to launch X-Therma.
This has been a very long-term personal journey. It started from a very sad story. My grandpa from mom's side, actually super tough man, decorated war hero. So, the man never spoke up, never speak sickness. But unfortunately, we lost him without getting a liver for transplant on time. That for me as an 8-year-old, super hard to accept. I asked my mom, anything we can change. My mom is a physician. She told me all about transplant. Since then, I got the concept. It's really not about we don't have donors. The true issue here is we don't have enough time. Because of that, many people waiting in vain and do not get a liver or organ for transplant. So I really want to change that. So determined to become a biohacker and chase this dream and see where I can make a difference. So I pick a biotech as my major, go to college, and I learned this amazing story. A kid's been recovered from the frozen river after a couple of hours and is fully recovered. So I came up with this crazy idea. What if we can just freeze the organs? It's very simple. Everything in your freezer lasts longer than your refrigerator. All we need to do here is to prevent the freezer burn. But that's not a simple task. To prevent the freezer burn, of course, you have to add something to protect the cells. Not everything can do the job. You certainly cannot add a car coolant to make it happen. Or using DMSO, we use it routinely to preserve isolated cells. because all of those require high concentration and eventually, maybe you don't have ice crystal formation, but the organ will be killed. So they become a immediate question for chemistry. Can we find some new chemical so effective to control the ice also does not introduce toxicity? That becomes an interesting question. And certainly there's not enough research going on in the chemistry field. But on the other spectrum, nature has fabulous solutions for us. There are species living in the Arctic Ocean, fish, insects. They came up with fantastic, remarkable ideas to solve this issue. In the wintertime, they make a tiny quantity of peptides called antifreeze proteins, and they only do this job to prevent ice damage, freeze burn, and control ice crystal formation, and let the animals survive. However, such an amazing product can never be scaled up for meaningful production. You're talking about a couple tons of fish, maybe a few grams of protein, but they are not even pure. And of course, applying fish protein into human application just not feasible. A lot of issues, stability and the biocompatibility issues. So this, again, essentially a new chemistry challenge I really want to tackle. So I decided to pursue my PhD in chemistry. And that's how I met Mark in very cold zone, SUNY Buffalo. We survived. And after graduation, though, I got a lot of offers to pursue academic work and also going to companies. But I think my heart is settled on making this happen, truly solve the unmet need. So decided to start a company. And that's why you hear, like, we started Molecular Foundry in the same time. Mark is pursuing his DARPA project as a leading postdoc, and I'm carrying X-Therma.
Wow, that's a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing that story about your grandfather. Mark, maybe you can still tie that chemistry problem that you're trying to solve. I think you're trying to imitate what's happening in fishes, and you're doing this peptide research. What came together to lead this startup further?
Yeah, so definitely the chemical intuition is very important. So you talk about rationally designing molecules and drugs and computer animations and computer fitting models into proteins and such. But really, as a chemist, you see what nature has. And you say, wow, nature can do this thing. Why can't we? Can we develop simplified structures that can rival nature's function? Yeah, there's real examples now. There's Nobel Prizes based on that work with Jean-Marie Nunn. And so as interdisciplinary chemists, Xiaoxi and I, we think differently. We were trained with supramolecular chemistry or biomimetic type of chemistry, not necessarily just synthesis or just characterization or just another type of chemistry, but really understanding how all the molecules interact with each other. How do the molecules flow on a highway? And I think that kind of insight is what helped us look at these proteins, these antifreeze proteins. They're in fish's body. They help fish survive in sub-zero conditions. Seawater is about -2 degrees C in the north where these fish live. And their blood is not that salty compared to the water. So they need some way to solve this problem of ice. As a chemist, we put the molecule in our head. We look at these proteins. We start to understand the different structures that exist, all kinds of different structures. How can there be so many different structures? Why do they not have anything that seems to be precisely connected between all of them? So you have to use a lot of chemical intuition to say, oh, here's that special spot. I think here's some residues that we can mimic. And where do we get a backbone? Where's the backbone for chemistry that we're going to put this on? A peptoid, something synthetic as well. And so it takes all of those different interdisciplinary thought processes to really get started with this technology in the first place. Thinking about controlling ice formation is way different than thinking about a drug that targets a protein or a paint that coats a surface or any other type of chemistry like that. That's really where the spark came, all the interdisciplinary science behind it.
Yeah, it's fascinating how nature has so many answers to the questions we have, everything from penicillin to antibiotics to, in this case, antifreeze chemical that you guys are coming up with. Maybe that's a nice segue to talk about product evolution. When you first started the company, what was the first product looking like in your mind? And how has the company evolved? I've read some of your work. It's about organ preservation. Now you're talking about cell and gene therapies and so on. Everything is super fascinating. If you can tell us how that progressed and the decision-making process.
Absolutely. It's always a fun time to go back to history. Like when we just first started, we focused on bringing a new chemistry for revolution. And this is not only like about to slow down the organ damage through preventing the ice damage. Also, like you can think about it in the whole world. There's like a huge need for anything to prevent ice damage, like antifreeze for the cars, antifreeze for the airplane, de-icing, and ice cream. Ice cream is all about how you control ice crystal formation. Of course, there's a huge demand in the cosmetics skincare industry as well. And so it's mixed with the regenerative medicine and the industry application to the consumer business. Broad spectrum, $200 billion, like the industry can benefit from a new non-toxic, effective antifreeze molecule. That gave us a lot of fun time to brainstorm, but also gave us a lot of headache. I still remember the first inflection point for us is really try to narrow down which market we want to focus on. That was very, very hard because we say everything is exciting, especially in the early stage. We met many angel investors. Everybody has different ideas. Someone is very used to investing in the automobile industry. So they wanted to guide us to the car coolants. Someone very interested in the organs. So that is really guide us here. We really need to do a market analysis. What is something X-Therma could reasonably achieve on time and making a breakthrough and penetrate this market first. So finding that the first go-to market took us like a reasonable time. Actually, we think it's well worth spent.
Yeah. Let's stay on that thread. What is the conversation like between you and Mark as the co-founders? Like there's the chemistry involved. There's different markets that your product can go into. Was there any difference in the chemistry that is going on in each of these spaces? And what role did that play? I'm just trying to dig into the conversation between a CTO and a CEO of a company and a decision-making process, which is usually driven by the markets.
Yeah, one good example is the airplane industry. So if you think if you're developing a new molecule, an antifreeze agent for the airline industry, it's a new molecule, it's novel. It has to compete with commodity chemicals, some of the cheapest chemicals around. So how are you going to be able to compete with that? Well, what you really need to do is make it permanent. So you have to take what we have as a molecule and somehow make a surface coating out of it. That is its own area of research completely. That could be done quickly, or it could take years in order to figure out how to orient the molecules appropriately to make a surface coating. So when we start to think about what markets are we narrowing down, we think about what is the technical challenge to achieve that versus the actual gain. Competing against the commodity chemicals that they just spray on, there's 4 different classes, depending how long they last, 15 minutes versus an hour and a half. And you get down to the tech discussion, then evolves into the economic discussion, and you see if it makes sense or not at this time. Because then you also have to talk about scale up. How much scale do you need to de-ice airplanes? As a first market, that means that your technology needs to go from tiny scale to gigantic scale immediately. Before you probably are able to prove that the product is really going to gain traction with the airline industry, you need to already be producing it at the multi-ton scale for adoption. Those kind of discussions between a CTO and a CEO on strategic direction, those are some of the things we discussed together. And why would it make sense to do regenerative medicine versus airlines strategically as a CEO? And you would think maybe the regenerative medicine market is harder, but you need smaller scale. It's a higher value market. It's a more need. These drugs are living now. Stem cells, engineered tissues, they critically depend on the cold chain. You can spray down an airplane with antifreeze and just keep spraying it. But if you screw up on the cold chain for your stem cell therapy, that stem cell therapy doesn't work and the person may not be safe. The strategic argument is that that's actually a much stronger market for this technology. So then as the CTO, I need to figure out how to craft that entry appropriately to match the CEO's strategy on market selection.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah. It's all about like a timing. we always learn from many pitfalls from founders coming from scientific backgrounds. We're very used to writing proposals, making hypotheses, and building the science. A lot of time, technology become a way ahead of the market adoption. Sometimes we build this science. You can see 20 years down the road being picked up by the industry. By the time when you start a company, and it's very difficult to get the recognitions from the market. One thing we really learned is to do early stage customer discovery as early as possible, as many as you can, because you can have a lot of hypotheses maybe coming from your heart, from your mind, but then that might not be true, in terms of customers' eyes. So actually, on the beginning, we conduct very thorough process of customer discovery, and we talk to transplant surgeons, dozens of transplant centers, and then we talk to the cell gene therapy companies, and we see since 2017, cell gene therapy truly met its milestone and lifted. So we see that's a perfect timing, and we wanted to learn what is the pain point from the customer's perspective. As Mark said, the customer really see the pain points. They have some immediate need to be solved. So that make our market penetration much easier. So if we can deliver this technology can meet their needs, then all the business sector will flow much easier. That really guide our decisions. We are scaling up a new chemistry, as Mark said, is a scarce resource. But if you want to compete with commodity chemistry, that demands a robust manufacturing scheme and super abundant scale up process. So that's not something we can build with very short time. So all of those above really guide us to narrow down and focus on the regenerative medicine, focus on the best value added to the living medicine.
So many factors to consider there. Thank you for covering that ground on that. Xiaoxi, I would like to go back to a couple of things you mentioned about timelines. You mentioned about timing, speaking to all these customers. There are so many dots you need to connect. Start with when you first started the company, what did you have in mind in terms of a timeline of when you thought a product will be in the market and what that reality was? And I think an appropriate plug-in question around that is going to be what was that one decision that helped you get to that? What did you decide as the first product there?
As a fellow entrepreneur, the timing in our mind often does not match to the reality. Everything in our mind is much faster. It's just like when you do your Ph.D., if everything works as a hypothesis, you can be done within a year, but generally take 5 years. So to polish a product from the ideation to the prototype, to optimization, to process development, to the final product and launch to the market takes time, takes a process and the practice. So for us, I would say there's several major milestones we meet. I still remember to the date on the beginning of the journey, we just work in the lab at the Lawrence lab, and we're making milligrams of our product, and we're super happy when we see it works, and we bring into testing platform. We think completely differently from the industry, also a majority academic centers for this, how to solve these issues. Because X-Therma is the first company built a platform. We can generate abundance of rational design molecules and going for testing. So it's not serendipitously picking what's available, but with this way, we need to think about complete different scale of testing platform. That means we cannot do a singly testing. We need to build a system. Through this journey, actually, we built the first in the world testing platform using some existing infrastructures, X-ray crystallography, to detect the crystallization inhibition efficiency from the molecules. And then we quickly run down to the next run of the in vitro testing on the cell platform and bring that to the higher throughput level. And then we go to the fine-tunes ex vivo and in vivo testing for transplant. Several memorable events, first time our scientist came to me and said, it beats, it worked. I said, what do you mean? I said, the heart came back after a few hours preservation. with our solution. And hook on the machine, it beats. So that's super exciting. And we brought that to the transplant surgeon, the world leading transplant surgeon, Dr. Gary Branneker from Hopkins, and done many world firsts, the double hand transplant, entire male genitalia organ transplant. I still remember he told me, well, it sounds pretty good, but I'm remain suspicious with the results. So I have to see from my own eyes. But I will tell you, if this is true, you may have solved the biggest breakthrough since transplant. So he gave us this challenge, like ask us to do 24 hours mouse heart transplant. He said, in the world, no matter what technology you use, we just cannot keep any heart last for 24 hours. So we tried that with the gold standard solutions. In every OR room, you do human organ transplant and apply for the mouse hearts. 24 hours later, heart died and no survival. But on the other side, we completely turned this table around. So I carry the solution to Hopkins and we preserve the mouse heart with our solution below 0 degrees C. The heart remained not be frozen. 24 hours later, it brought for transplant. Mouse heart is tiny, but you put on the big screen on the last moment, like to watch that moment. You release the clamp for the donor heart to the recipient's body. Immediately, you will see like the blood flow into the organ. And then you see this first twitch. Wow, that was that moment. So like for me, and actually shows it really worked. And I heard all this congratulations from the adjacent surgeon. They came to me. They said, we have been dreaming for this for decades, like now really see from our own eye. And it really works. That means we don't need to have a 36 to 48 hours continuous transplant that can actually make this elective. So that's a summer moment for me. It's super exciting.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that beautiful story. I mean, I think as scientists, that is what we live for. And for all the deep tech entrepreneurs out there, the road is very hard. Some of the times, like you have to build your own facility, a new structure, new machine that is not existing. And there are not too many people that would believe. Even then, there's still obstacles of regulatory aspects of the science because you're dealing with life. And all this takes money. Maybe that's a nice segue to talk about how much money you needed and how did you, this is 8 years, right? Maybe I'm guessing, I know you raised venture capital money. Let's divide this into two phases, pre-venture capital money and post-venture capital money. If you can walk us through that, that'll help.
Absolutely. For us, one thing we're very blessed with is, I think we start with very solid scientific foundation. We know we're a very different animal. There's no money has been significant amounts of funding being invested in organ transplants or cell gene therapy cryopreservation field. So we know like we're not VC's eye candy on the beginning. So we have to survive in different way. We start from like successfully writing SBIR grants. So I will let Mark like take this because he's truly the expert.
Yeah, grant writing. That can be very important if you're lucky enough to have a scientific technology that can be funded by SBIR. Go for it for sure. We're just two people, technically one person who has no salary. I'm just a postdoc trying to live there in San Francisco on less than $40,000 a year.
This is 2014.
Yes, 2014 and 2015. And writing the first proposal. Perfect timing. Department of Defense releases a solicitation for new cryoprotectants as our company got started. And even at that stage, we have an idea. We're going to use these peptoids. And Xiaoxi has started the work in the lab already. We're still working for leads and trying to find everything. And we wrote the first SBIR and it got funded. We're one of 3 groups that got funded. Super lucky. And Xiaoxi was able to stretch that money out. She was finally able to have a salary and stretch that as far as she could to get as many leads as she could to find actually, hey, there's some molecules here that have a physical property. And we apply for phase 2 and DOD agreed that this is worth pursuing still. And it was awesome. So we were able to get our first $1 million there and push it forward. And then we wrote more and we wrote more. And then at one point we were 9 out of 10. We won 9 proposals out of 10 that we submitted.
Wow.
That was pretty phenomenal and very good timing. And The CERM also funded us because, of course, they're working in stem cells. And now that clinical cell therapy is online, it's a lot harder to deliver than people thought. The cold chain needs help. So we're also able to get funding from CERM to help there with the grants, not just DoD. NSF provided great support as well through SBIR programs and developed a multi-technology portfolio as we were exploring and learning more and narrowed it down to the technology that has the most ability to move forward and the most probability, and continuing that to today. We're still writing grants. I literally have a proposal due in a few days to NIH that we're still working on. It's a great supplement. And because of that, early raising was reactionary. We didn't have to go out and say, well, if we don't get this funding from this investor, I don't care what deal they give us, we have to take it. We luckily didn't have to do any of that. So that allowed us to get long-term investors who have a big vision and who are not looking for any immediate return. They want to see the product do what we say, actually help the world of organ transplant, rewrite how organ transplant is done. The grant funding allowed that all to happen. It gave the time for the technology to develop. There was the right risk level for the government to fund. It was not the right risk level for a VC to fund, or even some angels. It's still an idea with some basic proof of concept, but it takes visionary people, investors on the side, as well with granting agencies that can absorb that risk in funding new technologies. And so, that's pre-VC stage. I'll let Xiaoxi talk more about now at the VC stage and the Series A stage.
There's so much to unpack here before we go into the VC. I think I want to make sure we cover the ground here. Mark, 9 out of 10 is phenomenal. I have talked to so many founders and entrepreneurs in the space, and I haven't heard so many grants going into a startup, other than the fact that the timing was right. And there's also always a luck factor. If there are one or two things that stand out in why you were so successful, if you can touch upon that subject, it might help other people.
Yeah, I have helped a few others with writing their SBIRs. And I think it really comes down to clarity of thought. Writing a proposal, you think you need to put down your ideas on paper and everybody understands what you're doing. And of course they will understand. Why wouldn't they understand what I'm doing? And when someone else reads the proposal, you're like, they have 10 questions for you. And you say, well, how are they asking these questions? Isn't it obvious? No, you need to go back and you need to explicitly list it out, exactly what you're doing. You need to have a super clear story. You need to have a really good reason and significance. The story has to line up from the top to the bottom in order to make that grant application happen. And you also really need to focus on your imagery. Look at the best scientific papers. They have the best graphics. They took the time on the graphics. The graphics are clear at painting the picture. They match the storyline. They match the results. The story and everything is cohesive so that it is clear. So I would say those are two primary things you have to do from the beginning. When writing your first grant proposal, I always used to write a note, and I left the post-it note on my monitor every day. 1, tell a good story, and B, be very, very clear. So every email I write, everything I go back to and I reread, like, would someone else understand what I wrote here? And it's much more than just proposal writing. It's a lesson in leadership too. If you try to lead anybody and they don't know what you're saying or what you're doing or what you want or what is needed from the company, well, you don't get very far. That's very important to always remember, clarity and story.
Yeah. Also, important thing is on the market side, truly understand what market you're trying to tackle and really do a thorough analysis instead of like we just pull some number from like a marketing reports. So that really helps. And also this writing is a component. You also need to build a network to support such. So I cannot emphasize enough how important to build out your KOLs, your advisories to support this effort. Because as a newcomer to the new field, for us, essentially we're outsiders. We're not in the cryobiology field. We're not even in biology field, but we're trying to resolve the long-lasting biology issues. So we need like a very strong backers to helping us like understand this field to be our advocate, to tell others this is a technology deserves some attention. So that's also important.
Interesting. Mark, you brought up an important point about the imagery. I think people who read these grants don't really have that much time, and those pictures speak 1,000 words. I think clarity in that pictures, imagery, I've seen some of your grants, so I know how good of a job you do. Thank you for highlighting that. And coming back to you, Xiaoxi, you mentioned about that market side of it. Tell us more about what is that market confirmation that you had to bring to the table for the grantors to believe in your chemistry, your startup here, especially because you're not an insider. You're not from the space. What do you think convinced them, and what did that proof look like? If you had to give one example, was it a letter of support? What would a key opinion leader look like in this space?
Yes, I strongly believe biggest innovation can happen in the cross field. That's what we bring in the new blood to solve these legacy issues. So I think bringing in like a very sound presented science is important. Also, like you truly should speak the language, like the field experts know. That's one of the biggest challenge for us being outsiders. We may not know like the proper language and proper theme. Be able to attending some of those field experts events, making friends with several of the key pulmonary leaders is become very important. Always doing convictions from somewhere, trying to talk to the field leaders. And actually, I found most people very willing to speak with new innovations because everybody is driven by scientific curiosity. So that built like a very strong, solid ground so we can reach out. Just don't be shy to reach out. I think that's all it takes.
Yeah.
Add a little bit to that. What does it look like, or what does that type of person look like? What we found is that, there's a lot of people who are very well respected and they're very excellent at what they do. But there's much fewer people who also have the vision to try something new. That is the type of KOL you need to look for, at least in terms of science. Someone who not only is well respected, but who is always looking to push the boundaries forward, even if it means overwriting work that they did, because they're always looking for something new and they're always looking to push. Those are really great KOLs.
Absolutely. Mark, on the SBIR front, what would that funding amount to? Like if you had to put a dollar figure over 9 grants, what would that look like?
The 9 was probably 5.3. Now we're at 11.1 for the company's history out of, I think, 12. So initially, there was a point where we had a dozen people working on 5 grants at the same time, just starting our own facility, our own little space. Everything was running all at the same time. So it's a lot to manage. And I'll tell you, so it was almost a burden of success. I will tell you that.
Good burden to have.
You had to learn how to hire very, very quickly, appropriately, and take a lot of thought about it, find the right people. And you had one person is doing 3 projects. And Xiaoxi, I know you had mentioned this at the conference one time. You had been in a meeting and the CTO presented that they had 8 projects and 80 people. And someone in the audience was like, how do you handle 8 projects with 80 people? It's like, how do you handle 5 with 10?
Yes, exactly. But that actually trained us to become a really good project manager. So that's some assets we've always been looking for, the talents. And you'll be able to multitasking and be able to have a grand start and a fabulous finish. The results matters.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to bring up that point about the amount of money you have raised, this is non-dilutive. You're not giving up any equity. Just for the aspiring founders out there, the SBIR, Small Business Innovation Research Funds, is phenomenal. So many organizations give that money, and you should definitely spend some time in that because early stage, nobody's going to believe you in terms of venture capitalists or angels for that matter. Maybe that's a nice segue to go into your original question about venture capitalists, Xiaoxi. Venture capitalists usually look for signals. Like, can they make a lot of money? I think that's what they're driven by. Mission is only a small part of it, but mostly I believe they don't have hearts, they have brains, and they need to make money. This is said by many people. I don't think they'll take offense to that. So if you had to take this business case, what was that business case you were able to convince them and the market size you had to show that this is worth going after? And you can get into that subject of like the kinds of venture capitalists that said yes to you, the kinds that said no, and what are the lessons learned in that process?
Absolutely. Yeah. As I mentioned, we are not that typical company going to be a VC eye candy. So it took us a lot of perseverance to go through a lot of failures to find the right ones, because there's no existing equations for measuring X-Therma's market value. Because we are such a platform technology, we can enable the entirely new regenerative medicine. For cell gene therapy side, you just separate them into different silos. The cell gene therapy side is exciting, and 2,000 companies in the race in the whole world to rush to get to the next big cure using the cell as a living medicine. But X-Therma is providing a breakthrough technology. Now you can have a non-toxic solution to have a non-compromised results, which means protect the cells from ice damage. So before and after freeze, until you get to the patient, you get a premium quality. So that means the cells are ready to save lives. We have competitors in the world. So if you say like 5 years ago, they're all smaller companies, but because the timing is so right, the entire cell gene therapy field is lifting. So every single one of them, if they're public, worth billions of dollars. So X-Therma here not only have the product, can do their product currently do, but do much better. Most importantly, we can provide a lot of values other product cannot even achieve. That kind of a comp gave certain investors the confidence, we're close to the business. We are launching the product. We already have early revenues from early access customers who are not satisfied with the existing solutions and converting to X-Therma is willing to pay for our product and become our partners and going for strategic alliance. That is the important market maturity, showing to the investors. On the other side, we also attract global long visionary investors, and they are really aiming for the final jewel on the crown. And also, I believe there are lots of social impact investors out there, and they are looking forward to making good return of investment as well as help its society. So organ transplants really fit into that segment. So the transplant market actually just billables in US, we bill about $45 billion every year, just less than 40,000 solid organ transplant per case. This is a huge expenditure, not only for patients, also for the healthcare system. So X-Therma here, in fact, are able to remove the time of the equation. It means you can get a lot more abundant organ for transplant and better organ for transplant that significantly benefits the payers and also transplant centers. And there's existing bills and billables so we can plug into. So those market analysis is not obvious, but we have done thorough job. So we're presented and the investors are very excited about such. Also on the organ side, you're here in the world and now we're not only using human organs, potentially pig xenon transplant organs can become a potentials and with 3D printing organs. So all of that X-Therma can here to help to do the transportations, take time out of the equation so you can freely do centralize the organ repair, recovery, rejuvenation, and make the world a better place with more abundant life-saving medicine.
Yeah. How much venture money were you able to raise so far? And give us a sense of the profile of the investors that came in. And what do you think convinced these investors as opposed to others who did not come inside? Any lessons learned from that process?
So we actually, last December 2021, we closed oversubscribed the 13 million Series A finance. Previously, we raised the seed round as well. So that powers us to actualize our market entry for cell gene therapy field and as well as getting through the biggest milestones for organs. And for our landscape of investors, actually, I would love to thank for all our global angel investors first. As Mark mentioned, we are very different in the beginning. We've never been craving for funding for a very long time. So allowing us to really acquire some very high quality visionary angel investors global wide. All of them, they really helped us for Series A finance and then being super supportive, like on every single step, and then making introductions to the investors they believe share the vision, values, and also can help us to grow. We have the lead investor. Actually, they themselves are fifth generation entrepreneurs building like billion-dollar enterprise. They are super supportive with the long visions. They're more on the family office side, but also they do very successful investments for biotech and the medical device. This round has been so crowded. We had to turn down several term sheets from our strategic alliance for investment, but we're still working with them as partners for business side.
Congratulations on that success. Say more about turning down a term sheet from strategic partners. How hard was that decision? I can only imagine, where people are dying to take in money and like you're in this unique situation where you can say no. And why were you able to say no? Walk us through that decision-making process.
Actually, there's several of those term sheets we turned down. The reason for that is quite simple. We actually want, because we have such a scarce platform, it's like leading the innovation here and could potentially become the new field standard. We would love to be able to freely have like more opportunity to work with many partners at one time. Be able to have this freedom of operation become important at that stage. On the other side, we have a lot of investors waiting to put funding in X-Therma. So even we leave the term sheet on the table for strategic investments, they won't hurt for us to build a very strong relationship for business. So then that become a very clear cut. We start from like a very similar level of ground. We don't have a pre-bounded investment relationship. So then we can build a very mutually beneficial business case. So that was the thought process, and we've been well supported by other investors.
Add a little bit to that strategically thinking. You're trying to build a business like X-Therma. We have organ transplant, cell and gene therapy, engineered tissues. Maybe later we can do cosmetics and ice cream. We'll be the first company to commercialize a peptoid on a real commercial scale. Who knows where that can go? This is an opening for chemistry. So when you start to think about term sheets and you start to think about restrictions, and yes, you can go here, no, you can go there, you can't do this. You start to think about the advice of former founders when they say to you, the worst thing for you to ever give up is your freedom. Because if you're trying to build something big and you take that term sheet, now you've lost a chunk of that. The flexibility has been reduced. You know, as an entrepreneur, the plan is going to change continuously all the time. As soon as another COVID comes, now there's a fire. Now there's smoke in the lab. Okay, now we're raising a Series A. Then all of this mess, the plan changes. So if you restrict yourself by taking one of those term sheets when you don't have to, that becomes a big issue. And so strategically thinking, we just said, hey, we have other opportunities. We have these long-term investors, perceiving investors who they said when they're in for 20 years. They don't care. They're not looking to sell the company next week, next month, whatever it is. They want to build the biggest value. And they said, as founders, that sounds very good. That sounds like the right kind of investor for us.
Yeah, it's also important thing is you want to make sure give your shareholder the biggest return. That's our fiduciary duty. We strongly believe like the organ side will have a huge upside. So if our strategic investors become like very strong voice, maybe we can be guided to do something not necessarily get to our final goal. So that become an important piece. So we want to be able to still go on the journey we always plan to, and still working very closely with our strategic partners for business side. They have so many things we can learn from, and we're eager to learn, and we're excited with all this partnership.
Speaking of partners, can you shed some light into the kinds of partnerships you're able to build, and what does strategic mean in your case?
That's a lucky part for us, I think, because we're here to support the heroes. We're not the heroes. Our success really rely on our product really shows the values to deliver those life-saving medicines without being compromised by toxic components delivered to the patients really shows results. With that sense, I mentioned there are 2,000 companies in the world are developing different type of cell therapies and tissue engineering products, and they're all our potential partners. We have some early adopters in the sectors that they're really happy working with us because we're helping them to solve some unmet needs, current burning issues with the scale-up production and also the bioprocess. So that's the partners we really adore and we love to help them.
So the problem seems super important, big enough. And in your journey of 8 years, what are the challenges that are preventing you from speeding up? Is it technology, Mark? Xiaoxi, is it market? Or is it a combination of that? Give us a sense of that. It just seems so obvious. I would hope investors and partners would just line up. What is slowing down the process, if there is any?
Several things. So first, we need to build a solid scientific foundation. That's an approach we took very differently from typical value-based companies. So we believe we need to slow down and go fast. Actually taking time to build the science, that become an important piece. So then we're ready to launch. When we launch, there will be very rapid pace. That's the inflection point for the Series A funding. On the other side, if you say something slows down, like I would say, to get the investor recognize the value is a long process. As I mentioned, this field has historically no money around it. No one even believes this can happen. If you're trying to say, I'm building something generally recognized impossible and now become possible, there's a lot of doubt from people. That take a lot of convictions. And that's a long time spent. Another thing is everybody is being slowed down by the pandemic. But for us, I think the pandemic gave us a great opportunity. Like in 2020, one thing we learned in the hard way is we have amazing science popping up. We have 4 or 5 different types of vaccines, all very effective. But in terms of larger scale production and send it out to the last 1 mile delivery, become a big issue global-wise. Still remember, the Pfizer vaccine require -70 freezer. That actually demand dry ice, all those large equipment. The whole world almost choked for that winter. That's the first time, actually, the whole world to recognize we need to strengthen our cold chain logistics and all related to regenerative medicine. So you can see cold chain suddenly become the hottest topic in Wall Street for a very long period of time. So that also helped people to recognize how important the X-Therma is trying to solve the issue.
Absolutely. I think I'm best not to talk about some of the phenomenal achievements you guys have achieved. Mark, maybe you can talk about receiving the FDA breakthrough device designation, what that means. Some more detail on that will be helpful.
Yeah, that's one of those validations, right, of the technology. And that's one of getting back to investors and what stage is it right for certain investors. Well, now we have some of those FDA questions answered, where we have a breakthrough device designation based on some studies that we did in pig kidneys. So now we even have FDA's agreement that this technology really could impact lives. And we may be able to preserve kidneys for up to 5 days outside of the body. So that's when you take the organ out of the donor, you transport it to the recipient, 5 days. That's global transport. You're now talking about being able to take a kidney to anywhere on the planet where there's a transplant center. You're now thinking maybe you can actually eliminate organ waiting lists. So the impact of that is enormous. And on the company, the impact is also big. Of course, it's a driver. It's a motivator. It's huge for internal motivation. One example is working in a startup or any job. You come in and you keep working hard every day. And it's like 2 years. And it's like, what? I keep working hard every day. Why is there nothing? Oh my God, the company has a breakthrough device designation now. Suddenly something happens. So there's a lot of internal excitement that these kinds of designations, or you could say validations of technology, that can be brought about for team spirit. And of course, investor motivation, de-risking the product for investors and other groups. And of course, most importantly, our user base, which is the surgeons and the transplant centers. So they benefit enormously from using a breakthrough device. Transplant center actually gets reimbursed immediately. They don't have to wait for CMS to write a check in 6 months. No, it can happen immediately if they use a breakthrough device in a surgery. There's a lot of other implications, such as nationwide pricing. We don't have to negotiate the price of our product with every jurisdiction. We get one price nationwide. And most importantly, for a technology like this, we are allowed to have what's called a sprint meeting or a series of sprint meetings with the FDA. So that is where we can prepare questions and submit them to our FDA team. And they are required to respond within 30 days. You don't have to go through all of your data development. You spend all of your time doing your animal study, and then you get to the FDA's doorstep and schedule that pre-sub meeting. And they say, I don't know, I don't like the way you did this. Go redo it. We don't have to worry about any of that because we have the breakthrough designation. So it's phenomenal for product development. And I'm so glad we have it.
That is fascinating. Huge deal for startups like. Maybe you can dig deeper into that process. How long did that process take for you from the beginning when you identified that it is a possibility, approaching FDA and getting this?
So I guess it's about timing. Of course, it goes back to timing as well. So we're working with regulatory consultants years ago, just in advance. Would our product be regulated as a medical device? What class? One consultant says class 2 medical device. I say, okay, I guess that's our pathway. We'll just try to do a 510K later. As we were going, then we realized, ooh, there's this breakthrough device designation and it's new. And we said, maybe we can fit. We look at the criteria. We say, wow, it looks like we can really fit this. And for us, it wasn't like trying to squash a square peg into a round hole. It was obvious. So there wasn't as much bending or cracking or having to change all of our data development plans or our chemistry or anything like that, because the mission of the company is focused on organ transplant and eliminating organ waiting lists, which is an enormous benefit to patients everywhere. And so the actual work to get the designation was, of course, normal scientific background work. It's years of data from literally we have an idea to we made a chemical, to we formulated that.
8 years.
Yeah, we formulated that. Oh, and it preserves cells. Oh, that's what? Great. It works on cells. And then we try it. We just go from a cell to an entire mouse organ. It's a small mouse organ, but that's, the size is enormous compared to single cells. And it worked. And then you take that same technology and you go to pig kidneys. It's a 220x scale up from that mouse heart. And it worked. And we didn't have to do changes. So the scientific background was good enough at the start. Because again, what Xiaoxi mentioned, sometimes you need to go slow in order to go fast. It's accelerated us all through now the breakthrough device, initially spending that hard work in the beginning to get everything as right as we can at the start, and then go through, made the process of getting the breakthrough device designation much, much easier.
Congratulations on that. That is, oh my God. I don't hear too many startups telling the story, but thanks for sharing that. And all this must take a huge team. Talk us through about your team. How big is it right now? And you've always fondly talked about culture at your startup, a rare thing that early stage startups talk about. What does culture mean to you guys? And how do you propagate it in the team from the time you hire to execute? And any lessons learned in that process?
We're getting close to 20 now, global-wise. Actually, not only headquartered in the San Francisco Bay, we just started our first subsidiary in Innsbruck, Austria. We truly built the global team. I would say two things super important for startup. One is the team, and the second is our IP. So we're very grateful to have a super awesome team to work tirelessly every day together for this impossible mission. Speaking culture, I think culture is a super important thing. Cannot emphasize the importance for that. For us, I think we really bring people alike together and then make this culture not only just founders' culture, X-Therma's culture, it's the whole team's culture. So we believe to build a A-class startup really demands the dreamers. So we have all the dreamers coming from different countries, different backgrounds, trying to achieve something not usual. They have a personal dream and an institutional dream. And be able to think very big and to think go big or go home is like a very fundamental for us. And to achieve that, we cannot just daydream. We have to put in work. And so the chase for excellence with exceptional perseverance is important. It's how we're going to reach the star. In terms of how we connect with the team, very important things here is like we hold with the highest integrity because we are here to make a breakthrough medical device, medical product. So we have to hold the highest quality standard with the integrity, do things right. With that, we have this team. Actually, only a few is born, raised in America. So it's truly a melting pot, like for us, with all different backgrounds, different countries, all coming together. We have a variety of a background. So we first learned this like to respect each other. And that respect comes from very deep inside. Why X-Therma exists? Because we truly respect life. We respect all the donors willing to give their life to others. Currently, those life is not properly transferred. Majority is not ending up to save another life. So we want to solve that because we respect the lives. So that kind of deep respect coming towards our hearts and the X-Therma belief what is the right way to help our customers, our users, the transplant surgeons, cell gene therapy developers, to truly bring them a product, can make their current workflow easier, improve efficiency, and improve the safety margin, make their job done better. So that is the day satisfaction for X-Therma. That's our highest respect and support we can be giving. Also coming down to the team culture, respect and support to play the long way. Because we're coming from different backgrounds, we wanted to first to think on the other people's shoes and truly respect each other and support the team decision. So that gave us this foundations. We have a very well worked team together and move forward as a whole.
Fascinating. And it looks like you built a strong organization with just 20 people. What is one question you ask or a decision that you make while hiring somebody that is super important for you guys? Are there any hard decisions you had to make because of your culture?
I'll talk about hiring because hiring to me is extremely important. Of course, we say we have people and technology, but it is my requirement that I review every single resume that comes to the company. I don't have time to respond to everybody, so I'm sorry if you didn't get a response, but I absolutely review every single one that makes it into my LinkedIn or wherever it's going because it's critical. It's a core, it's integrity in the hiring process. And we have a very well laid out system. We try to ask candidates all the same questions, put them all on even footing. And what do you end up with? You end up with an organization that only has 4 people born in the US. It's extremely diverse. Even the group in Europe, none of them are from the same country. They're all from different countries because you're hiring people on your talent. We don't read your name. We try to avoid reading your name. We avoid reading your university. We don't care where you came from. We care about what are you able to do and what can you bring. So all of that starts with the hiring process on how to build the team. We even highlighted recently in the California Life Sciences diversity and inclusion issue in June. As an organization that is diverse and hires for diversity, without having the focus on diversity, the focus is on what you bring to the table. And you find out that you get a very diverse organization to start with.
And is there one question that you really look for?
Yeah, yes, one question. So that's why I wanted to build into that story, remember? Tell a good story. So one question I always like to ask people, and it really screws them up, is why would you not work at X-Therma? And then people are like, what? I've only ever had one person answer that question right. One person ever. And he was not the guy that you would imagine knew that question. It's very simple. It's an assessment of our organization through the candidate process. What are you saying as a candidate about X-Therma? And it's something that catches people off guard and they don't fully understand it, but they give us a lot of information about what did they see that maybe is going to work with this role for them or what might not work for the role. Some people just say, well, if the salary isn't good enough, some basic stuff like that. Some people don't put thought into it, and some people put a lot of thought into it. So we can use that question. And sometimes it does, again, get back to your initial question there of a tough decision. You may have a person who has every single thing listed on the paper that they need. They're great in person, and they're great at chatting, and they're great at talking about their experience. And you believe it that they have this experience. But then they say something on the why not work at X-Therma. And then you're like, it's like the exact antithesis of why you're here as a candidate today. Dang it. And then you have to go through the process and dig in there and really understand, is this person ready for a startup? Do they want to contribute to this kind of thing? Have they thought about the time? What would their position be like at X-Therma? Yeah, I mean, that's my question I love.
I think it's like really about this question is to truly bring the candidates to reality. Like, does something bother you? It's something like a really objectively hindered your decision. So that is important, like to reflect to themselves to say, oh, it's exciting, but how realistic is this for me? That's just like bringing some thoughts. Yeah.
And I always ask very practical questions up front. I send a questionnaire with very practical questions. Have you thought about moving here? Do you have the resources required to move here for this role? Some basic questions like that. And then you realize, this person hasn't thought about the job at all. And I've gotten all the way to the end where we make an offer to people. Everybody loves it and they seem to love it. And then they reject the offer and they say, oh, I don't want to work for a small company. I say, why didn't you tell me that 3 weeks ago when we started the interview process? So I've learned over time just to be super upfront, really clear. And I say right in the beginning, first email, we are clear and we're honest. And I know that is weird, but it's truthful. We want to know what you're really thinking.
That is great advice. I think the basic things that are important, listing them down, getting it out of the way is super helpful to not waste your time. I think it's a nice segue to talk about something completely different, because I know you as friends and also as a married couple, you're basically a couple at home and also as co-founders at work. Talk us through that chemistry. How has that been working out? If someone else were to take this path, any lessons learned will be really helpful there.
Well, a lot of people, like you're probably already familiar, a lot of investors say, we don't want to fund the couples. You hear those things. For us, it's hard to understand the concern. I guess the investors' concern about what if the couple went on divorce. That will jeopardize the entire company and will shake up the foundation. Yeah, that happens. Definitely happens for people going divorce. But I would say statistically, you will see most founders actually fire founders more than the investor fire founders. A lot of founders, they got to know each other with a very short period of time. When things will grow and with stress or grow fast, not everybody in the same pace or understand the same level. So there will be confliction happening. But as couples, so like us, and we've been knowing each other since graduate school, and we work together, same project on the different aspects, and works through the career, building the career together. It's like a more bulletproof relationship. It's like we are a whole family together. So we really admire each other's strengths, really set up the boundaries. We separate our roles, but with equal partnership. So that really helps here. A lot of things Mark do fantastic. I don't even need to look at it. We have the full confidence with each other's capability. But that doesn't mean we don't have a heated conversation. We definitely, if there's a certain decision need to be made, we definitely stand on our shoes to make the points across. But it's very based on the objective conversation, discussion.
And I would say that point is even stronger when you have a married couple founder relationship. You know, if you're just two guys who met 3 months ago and now it's year 2 and you're like, fine, I'm just going to go with whatever they say. I don't want to argue here. Well, then maybe you're heading down the wrong pathway because you didn't stand up for your stance. But as a married couple, you know you can have that heated discussion and things aren't going to collapse. It's all going to be fine tomorrow morning. You're not going to find your co-founder went and got drunk in a bar and quit the company and send an email to investors like, I quit. None of that's going to happen because you're married. You're ingrained together. You can challenge each other. And again, getting back to that, we have opposite talents. So it's really, really beneficial for us. We've done science and business together from the beginning. From graduate school, we were doing science and business together.
Yeah, this is great. I don't know how it is any different from two co-founders going their way. If that really comes through, I don't understand the apprehensions of the investors or anybody for that matter. But tell more interesting stories about what does a work-life balance look like for you two?
Well, I would say at this point in my life, I'm very ingrained in work, and later in life, I'll have balance.
Yeah, definitely. I always feel like not being a great mom for my kids a lot of times.
It's tough.
But hey, the little one will say, "You are the super mommy," and that really calms me. And they understand you're putting into work, trying to save lives. So I think, there's a lot of sacrifice for sure to do this way. It'll never be easy. Everybody has a very tough time for sure. There's always a silver lining because every day we wake up and we improve each other, become a better person. So that has been a foundational values for us. We're infinite learners. We love to push each other to become better person. So then all the criticism and suggestions become easier to absorb. Does not mean nobody have emotions. Human emotional animal. Yeah, you will have your emotions, but all the things can be put aside and you will reach agreements and you will move forward. So that comes down to that respect and support. That's super important for this relationship.
Yeah, and I can't imagine any other way that you could learn faster.
Yeah, Xiaoxi and Mark, I totally believe that you're doing the right thing. I think I'm super glad that you are actually doing this. Otherwise, this innovation that's going to save lives would not have come to the world. So super thankful, and I'm glad you're doing this. And I hope everybody appreciates that. I know you've been very patient with me. Are there topics about X-Therma that we haven't covered that we should have? Anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah, we're always hiring. Well, now since we've raised Series A, so we have more chemist positions available, executive assistant position available as of today. We welcome you to come view our LinkedIn profiles or check out our websites and see what the company is doing. This is really about building a technology that could change the field of organ transplant. It's really huge, and we want everybody to come take a look.
Yeah. So for the growth side, we actually building our full GMP facility that will support the huge global demand for cell gene therapy product, X-Thrive. This is our first product, completely DMSO-free and serum-free, protein-free, and with a high performance attached to it. We are here to support the partners who need the scale-up biopreservation solutions. Also, a lot of bigger news, please stay tuned. Connect with us.
Follow us, yes.
Thank you for those plugins. I will have a link to your site on the show notes so people can know how to reach you guys. Now on to my traditional closing questions. Are there any lessons on mistakes to avoid while working at X-Therma that others could learn from?
I guess it goes back to hiring. Be principled. Just because the world has become crazy and everything is fast doesn't mean you need to make a decision immediately on a candidate. Take your time. You're not just hiring a body to fill a place. You're hiring a person who's a critical role in your company as a startup. You've got 9 people, you add 1 more, that's 10% of your company. So you need to really be sure, hold your principles, and don't be afraid of that stuff. Don't be afraid of hiring. Don't be afraid of having to talk to people. You have to call references. All of those good traditional things about hiring, they exist for a reason. So keep your principles and move forward with those.
Great advice.
For me, I think I want to share something with fellow entrepreneurs, especially growing from scientific founders or first-time founders. So there's a steep learning curve for everybody. That's nothing to be afraid of. So I think along the way, important thing is bridging from a scientific background to the business. We need to learn how to eliminate us trying to become the experts for a single point instead of being a generalist for a bigger picture. So that 80-20 rule becoming important, and learning how to lead, delegate, and support others, and then becoming your best teammate. That's become an important lesson for us. Learning to pull ourselves to the 8,000 feet up and to see the infrastructure with the eagle eyes, it becomes important. And don't try to own every single piece, and try to let something go and then gain something major.
Great piece of advice. And on to my second question. Are there one or two people that played a significant role in your success so far in building X-Therma that you'd like to acknowledge?
Yeah, I got one. Xiaoxi's mom has helped enormously with everything. I'm very honest. I say we wouldn't have a company without her, especially going through the pandemic and everything is changing. And, we still have someone at home making sure that, you have food and you have everything taken care of so we can focus on the business. Hardest time raising a Series A during all those situations. So I would definitely say Xiaoxi's mom is integral to the company's success. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would say for all the life gained and lost, this is our motivation. We are here trying to fulfill this hope and bridge the death to life. That motivates us every day. And then trying to support our heroes to make this happen faster and spread out and then truly benefit the humanity.
Excellent. On that note, thank you so much, guys. This has been so much fun, and it's a good way to catch up with friends again, I think, on my podcast, and tremendously helpful for me to understand, I'm sure, for the others listening. Good luck with everything. I really hope you can return to this show at some point when you're super successful and tell the rest of the story for this.
That would be nice. Yes.
Thank you, Neeraj. Yes. It's exciting. Looking forward to this is live.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Lab to Startup podcast. You can find links to the resources and programs mentioned in these episodes, connect with Naresh, or subscribe to this show at labtostartup.com.